Hi, I'm Anthony Sovak, and welcome to Community of Poets, Episode 4. I'm here today with Samuel Ace, local poet and president of POG, and that's a local poetry organization here in Tucson. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm really happy to be here.
We're glad to have you on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about your current projects in poetry and what you might be reading for us today?
Sure. Well, I'm going to read various things. I work usually on many projects at once. I'm going to read some work that's a little older, some collaborative work, a few pieces, and some very new pieces, too, that have yet to be published anywhere. I'm always work on many different projects at once.
You know, when we had Charles on the show, he said that he takes a project-based approach to constructing poems. And I know that, you know, at least for my own writing, it seems to be a little more haphazard than that. But seeing as, you know, he's a publisher and a you know, very well-respected poet here and nationally, that's something to think about. And have you found that it's less on the fly and much more, you know, structured, where it's, you know, I have to structure my, not just my time, but also what it is I'm going to work on and when I'm going to work on it?
I would say it's a little bit of both, but less project-based than not project-based. I consider myself very much, or at least I aspire to be, a poet of being in the present. And part of my practice is to be present as much as I can, and to be not only an observer but a participant in the present. So
that is, by definition, that's poetry, right? I mean, if you think of whoever you are holding me now in hand, you know, without this one thing, all is useless, as Whitman says, right? And when that one thing is you, now, here, with the book in your hand, reading it, you know, which makes us think, I want to be like Whitman and we should go do this outside. Read it in the skies.
Yeah, well, I would hope that. And I think part of my practice is to be as present as possible. So I make time, usually every day, to be as much of a channel as I can. Or when I'm walking down the street, or I'm a photographer as well, so being very much in that moment of presence, I aspire to that. So that's a little antithetical to the project-based approach. However, some things I've been working on, sometimes my collaborations are project-based, and sometimes you know, form can be a project in itself, where it's a frame to come back to every day or every moment. I've been doing a series of epistolary poems that are the dates are in there. I'll read a few of them today. So I guess form can be its own project.
Outstanding. Well, let's go with that.
Let's read some things. Let's do that. So I'm reading first some poems that have been published elsewhere, but I wanted to read out of this. This is this tome of an anthology called Troubling the Line, put together by two close friends of mine, T.C. Tolbert and Trace Peterson, who were the editors of this. It's a collection of trans and gender queer poetry and poetics. And I'm going to read the opening poem here in this book, and it's called I Met a Man. I met a man who was a woman, who was a man, who was a woman, who was a man, who met a woman, who met her jeans, who ticked the toe, who was a man who X the X and XX the Y. I met a friend who preferred to pi than to 3 or 3.2 the infinite slide through the river of identitude. A boat he did not want to sink, who met a God who was a tiny space, who was a shot, who was a God, who was a sun, who was a girl, who was a tree. I met a God who was a sign, who was a mold, who fermented a new species on the pier beneath the ropes of coral. I met a man who was a fume, who was a man, who was a ramp, who was a peril, who met a woman who carried the X and XX the YY who XX the simple torch. I met a man a woman who tells the cold, who preferred a wind, a chime, who was a silo, who met a corner, a fuel, an aurora, a hero, a final sweep. I sleep, the planet. I call my face scorched. It's been 10 years without a name, an ordinary life. I think I'll read one other out of this collection here. There's about 53 poets in this anthology. Each one of us has several poems in the book. Tell me what you know. Tell me what you know the future will traffic my security for your security, and the inflatable bus that takes me to the springs, the boy parts, the stains of coup, the prance, and the farm, hidden and encrypted and failed. I've tried to get in through the west fence, the pressure scolded for pain. It was the wrong direction. It was the serial surveillance that finished him off. It was the back end of sudden tradition, a hotel for gardens. The future will traffic my security for years, the inflatable bus that takes me to the springs, the boy parts, the stains of coup for pain, the wrong direction, the serial surveillance finished him off, the prance, the farm, hidden, encrypted, and failed. I've tried to get in through the west fence, the pressure scolded, the back end of sodden tradition, a hotel for gardens. And I thought I would read a couple of pieces from this book, recent book I published. It was a collaborative book. I do a lot of collaboration. Maureen Seaton, who's a poet, wonderful person I've known for years and years and years. We've done a lot of collaboration together. And she and I worked on this book, Stealth.
Can you talk, before you do read that, and thank you for that. First of all, I really love the sort of momentum in your poems. There's this very much, there's a rhythm there, and I'll have to spend a little more time thinking about that. But, can you talk a little bit more about what it's like pragmatically to collaborate with someone else on poetry?
Yeah. I feel that all my work is collaboration in one way or another, whether it's direct, where I'm going back and forth with someone else, or whether I'm working with what I've just read during a particular day, another poet. It's different with the different people I've worked with. Maureen and I have had a wonderful relationship around collaboration. We sometimes just go back and forth, have gone back and forth. In this book, it's in 3 parts. 2 of the parts, we each individually wrote poems, but we would send each other. And they were project-based. The middle section I was going to read a couple poems from is an abecedarian, where we gave each other words from the alphabet, secret words. They really weren't secret because we gave them to each other, so we knew. But she would give me a word, I would write a poem on that, I would give her a word until we went through the whole alphabet. And the first part was basically going back and forth, starting.
So it's kind of a game, really.
Well, parts of it have been.
Yeah.
Then we worked in couplets, where we went back and forth in the third part. Another collaboration I've been doing with J.J. Hastain has been just a series of prompts where they send me a prompt, I send them back a prompt, sometimes very much related to each other, but sometimes not at all. And that's been going on for quite a while as well. So different things. The one wonderful thing about collaboration I love, or the main thing about collaboration that I love, is that it gets me out of my own voice. When I'm responding, and I found this especially with Maureen, to someone else's voice, and certainly someone else's vision of the world, it pushes me to let go of my own tropes, my own idiosyncrasies. And I love that because I always learn something from it, and it pushes me in areas and places where I may not have gone by myself.
Excellent.
So I'm just going to read a couple of the secrets. So Maureen gave, this is secret number 3, and the word Maureen gave me was corruptionist. Strip me, starve me, little fountain, a coarse predator of love and pussitude, a private affair of some heart, some boy, some corruptionist passion. That was all it was worth, but worth carried forever as coins in my balls, that stink, that cradle, that fortune. And let's see. This is secret number 8, and the word I was given was fever. I got it, but of course she's female. Look down at my legs, thinning by the day. Tonight I'd pay a fortune for a fever of tobacco at the gem spa. I can't bear my bones, my dog's fingernails, the rancid sheets, or the shivering, decomposing girl rushing through my former body. So those are just a couple of the poems from that. And let's see, I have my list here.
Now I see that this isn't actually in a book, so is this some of your newer work?
Yeah, this is some of the newer work, although some of it was done around the same time. How about we do this one? This is dated March 21st, 2012 at 3:08:53 a.m. It's not the past that concerns me. It's not the can't, it's not the choice you didn't leave. It was night and the new of me and the new of you. It was night, but the sound of me, not the tank of me, but the rest. It's not the perform, the blink of holding, but the crisp of teeth. The agent, the weight of urgent dead, the throat of throats, the cream, the doornail that take your eyes. Recruit the star, the fish of rescue, counter to claim, a shelf of loss, my whale, my sea. The tank of me, a manhunt, and a minute to shave my head, the alarm shut, the piano, and the exhausted stare, the stamina of the military seat, the intimidated dead to take a seat. It took 6 months of interrogation running amok. It took an even greater fugitive to get us to this point, someone to put her arms on the line, someone to heaven, the intention of phantoms. You've helped so much with the chance of permanent regret, a loss of impossible days. I regret the finance, the vagrancy, the solo and tragic life of appalling loss. Where is our lead? Where are the eyes of a simple gift? If you are clear, you are mistaken for a rancid lie. If the track, the soldier, the dirt of junk, it's not the past that concerns me. It's not the can't. It's not the choice you didn't leave. It was night. It's not the past, the new of me, the new of love. It was the night, the sound of chant, the jump, the chest. It's not the tank, the breast, the brew that jumps the car. It's not the form, the blink, the crisp of teeth, the agent, the weight of urgent dead. The throat of throats, the cream of doors, the take your eye, take your star, the crisp of teeth, the fish of rescue, a count to claim, a shelf of loss, my whale, my sea. That's that. And I'll read a few more of these. August 11th, 2013 at 7:51:03. A courtyard at my feet, a couch, the wind, the waves like cordial fists. I live outside on the deck of a boat, a streamer of baking hitched across a private coast, the big current world in a big turquoise pool with Sherpas and giant turtles. I want to forget how to put words together. If I fail at failing, I want to laugh myself to sleep. January 19th, 2015. We have heavy heads. In the mud, our beards, our heavy anchors. We have sand, we have brows, we have grain, we have heavy breath, tart corn, we have bread, heavy bargains, haloed feet, bare pencils. We have run out of red. We have broken tiles. We have made a house in the car, heavy brackets, his wind-worn eyes. We have bands. We have bowls. October 28th, 2013. I give you a duck. I give you a duck, a trampoline. I give you a duck. I give you a parameter. I give you a way to fly. I give you a prince, a temper, a weight of water. I give you a duck. I give you a circle. I give you a lake. I give you tires. I give you home. I give you a duck, a tenor, a dozen hens. I give you a light, a morning. I give you the unbound box, a glass. You are not lost to the strange and stirring ghost. You are not lost to practice. I give you a duck. You are not lost, the current leaves. I give you a duck, the stairs. I give you a duck. I give you a beach. I take a tour. Here's where we rebuild. I take you. a walk. I give you a duck, a shore. I take you, a wrench. The blurbing needs water. I give you a tool. The beach has come up, the trip. I take you, a waltz. The certain. I give you a sound. I give you a beach.
Really, I really like that one. I really enjoy all of them, but for that one, to me, you've mastered there something that I see some of my student poets struggle with, which is repetition. So sometimes it's not always rhythmic, it's not always constant. I mean, in that one, then I give you a duck. Sometimes it was every other line, and sometimes it was, stanzas apart, but it came back. And when I was talking about sort of your rhythm as a poet, it can get frenetic. Is that a good word? I think that's a good word. But it can get very passionate, right? When you speak. So I guess that's, one thought, right? Is sort of, if you'd like to respond. But the other one that I had as you were reading, and you said this is a genre of poem that you're working with. What does it mean when we title a poem an exact moment? I mean, to the 10th of a second, right? When we talk more about being a poet of the moment.
Well, these poems, this group of poems, and I actually have carried this through for most of my work. I really just use the first line of the poem. It's not any more complicated than that, because every once in a while something will really capture what that poem is about to me, and that will be the name of the poem. But for the most part, it's the first line of the poem. Now, these poems are dated, so I guess that could be the title of the poem as well.
Yeah, I completely misread it. I'm like, here he is, like, this is the date. I wonder, is this the date he wrote on, or is this
well,
the
it's the date it started on.
Yeah.
Or there might have been just a phrase on that date that came up. But I recently decided to put those timestamps on, for lack of a better word, just to acknowledge that particular time and moment. Often they're at 5 in the morning or 4:30 in the morning. And it doesn't mean that that poem isn't edited or worked on 2 years later or 3 years later, or that just is a phrase from that initial place. But that's where that date comes from.
In your collaborations, is there anything you could say more about the revision process? I mean, in terms of, like, how do you go about revising a poem, in collaboration with others, and when do you know you're done with it?
There's a couple things I think of when in relation to this. First of all, these recent poems, coming out of my experience collaborating mainly with back with Maureen a few years ago, I started really collaborating with myself. So a lot of the rhythms that get picked up in the poems that I've just read are places where in the revision process I didn't want to revise anymore, but I also liked what was there. And I was trained as a musician when I was a kid. I'm also a visual artist, but the ultimate revision for me is the song, is what happens when I say or speak or recite these poems out loud to myself. And all of that has to work together, the sound of it, the music of it. I've actually, these poems, I know we're not going to do it here, but I've collaborated with other people in reading the poems. I've broken them down, like I Give You a Duck, I've performed it with 2 or 3 other voices, improvised on it. I've also have versions of these where I've improvised with myself with instruments, using basically GarageBand on my iPhone. I just performed these the other night, a couple of them. And sometimes I will improvise reading them chorally with the poems. they lend themselves to music, but I think about the music of them.
So again,
ultimately.
bringing it back into that moment and using that as
Yeah.
even,
Yeah.
you know, oh, I said it wrong, but it's not really wrong. I
Right.
like the way it sounds.
Well, I like the way it sounds, and it also adds in, and it's like a prism. It's another view into that moment, that, you know, a refraction of that moment, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of beautiful. It's beautiful, right? Because when you think of, okay, so here we are, we have me, you, we have our camera folks, we have our audience member, but all of this contributes to a moment, right?
Right. Right.
Excellent.
Yeah. So maybe I'll read just a couple. This is a much longer, it's a newer piece. I know. Give me a signal how we are on time.
Sure.
This is actually a very long piece, and I'm only going to read some of a few parts of it.
Okay.
Okay?
Great.
It's An Ocean Like Hush is the name of this. An ocean like hush, and the carpet trails the light from the bathroom window. Just on the other side of the door, open and tiled for the morning to beigely rise up out of the floor. Every morning, waking up to the quiet outside on the streets. No deal on the corner, no house of friends. Here is where I sit with curtains and barns of memories, with a quiet that is unattached, with the drapes and the faint little Buddhas, with the opera girls and the paper standing up at the window. I listen with a certain gratitude to cards, currents, breaks, trouble, bakers of heroic scones, the tides, the parts, the tarnished burdens of socks, funerally but neatly nested in drawers beneath the gravel and palm trees just outside my bedroom. My head rests under a sleeping boy, exhausted from a war long gone, but there he sleeps, naked on a cot, the north of the mountains pouring into my head. I sleep in his armpit and wonder about his smell. I too sleep exhausted from a war, as if the ocean hush, the black and white lips, the distant salt of ocean and skin will heal me. Simple pansies, goat-haired, on the green table. This morning I look east through palms, through pink, through my neighbor's low brick wall. She asked me if I would be hanging wind chimes and nodded disapprovingly up and down the row of apartments on my side of the drive. I looked. There was a wind chime on every patio. Days later, my wind chimes are still lying down out of the wind. I want my neighbor to smile at me in collusion. I want the same from my lover, my friends, my dog, the sidewalks, the winds, especially the winds, or most perfectly the winds, most revealing the winds, the currents, most of all, the compass. Last night I put my faith into those tiny centuries of stupid. I followed the code, and even then the talk took me onto the stage. I looked out at a red audience, through red curtains, a red floor. I had on a blue shirt in the midst of everyone's red shirts. My voice came out low and deep from my chest. No one could say what had settled there, what little pangs of desire, what clapping, what barns. No one could say what provoked my anger, my crime. No one could take down the rack of flowers, the rusty home. No one could assuage the skinned halt of this separation. But I had a moment when I looked up to see your slight legs, your tall and quiet form, your delicacy, my hands lost in your hair, an oboe. The overlays that saved me were necessary. So were the prayers. They made me think that there was no noise at all from anyone else living. They made me wonder about my withering and the cold sentry of my heart, trailing a letting go, a loneliness that had always been there. The open thing we call death and the little boys. And again, the seldom severed, my fairy pride in the slot machines at the airport in Las Vegas, all glitter, all syrup, and broken sidewalks, so many in wheelchairs, the not gone after death, the turnaround, the over-the-shoulder and peaceful laughter behind the weather reports, -7 in Buffalo, and shaking open a plastic bag. I'm underwater, but hearing, not breathing, but talking to you, breathing in my grandfather's fedora, the 10-foot transformers that hold it all together, symptoms of breakfast and the burdens of pilots. I'm wide awake this morning to spirits talking in shoes, a sieve of coral, all little fish passing through.
Outstanding. Well, I think that's about all the time we got left for today, Samuel. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you,
And
Anthony.
I hope we get to see you again here.
I hope so too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.